It was July 4th in Arizona, and while fireworks cracked over the desert sky, a young girl named Zariah Dodd stepped out of her group home. She wasn't going to a barbecue, she wasn't watching fireworks, she was sending her roommate one last chilling text. Just a single word: afraid. By morning, she would be dead, her body found in a Phoenix park with a bullet wound to her head. She was 5 months pregnant. Both she and her unborn daughter were gone. Now, I know that sounds insane because when people first hear this case, the headline alone makes you stop and say, hold on a second. A 16-year-old girl, pregnant, murdered on the 4th of July, and the killer is not only her 36-year-old abuser, but her own boyfriend helped set it up. It almost reads like one of those internet rumors you see on Twitter, where everyone in the comments is asking if it happened in Florida, Ohio, or maybe Texas because the story sounds so unbelievable. But this one didn't come out of a meme. This one came out of Arizona, and it was all too real. Welcome back to the channel where we explore the darkest true crime stories that sound stranger than fiction. Tonight, we're going into the case of Zariah Dodd, a girl who lived her short life bouncing between group homes and foster care, a girl who saw her own death coming and begged for help, and a system that looked away until it was too late. 16 years old, most young people that age are worried about driver's tests and prom dates. But Zariah Dodd, she was carrying around trauma that would break most adults. This girl had been bounced around Arizona's foster care system like a pinball. 20 different homes before she even hit her sweet 16. 20 homes. That's a new family, new rules, new disappointments every few months of her entire childhood. It's just like packing your life into a garbage bag over and over again, never knowing if the next house would have people who actually cared or if they were just collecting a check. That was Zariah's reality from day one. By April 2025, she landed at Sunshine Residential in Surprise, Arizona. Now, this wasn't your typical group home. This place was specifically set up for pregnant teens. And yeah, Zariah was pregnant, 5 months along, carrying the baby of a man old enough to be her father. Gerald Davis was 36 when he got 15-year-old Zariah pregnant. Let that sink in for a second. But here's the kicker. This wasn't Davis's first rodeo with underage girls, not even close. Back in 2008, when Davis was 19, he pulled the same move with a 14-year-old. 14. He got her pregnant, got caught, and you know what happened? Probation. No jail time, just a slap on the wrist and a child abuse conviction on his record. The system basically told him, hey, we see you, but we're not gonna do much about it. Fast forward 17 years later, and Davis was still hunting teenagers. This time he found Zariah, alone, scared, living in foster care with nobody to protect her. She was the perfect target for someone who knew exactly how to exploit vulnerable kids. September 2024 rolls around, and Davis gets caught with another missing 16-year-old named Anaya. The guy had a literal playbook for targeting children in the system, but somehow he was still walking free when he met Zariah. Davis didn't just get Zariah pregnant and disappear. He controlled her every move through fear and intimidation. This girl was terrified of him, and she wasn't shy about telling people. She'd look anyone in the eye and say, he's got a gun. He'll hurt me if I don't do what he says. The staff at Sunshine Residential later claimed they loved Zariah like family. They said all the right things after she died. But when she was alive and begging for help, when she was telling them she was scared for her life, that love somehow wasn't enough to keep her breathing. Think about Zariah's reality for a second. She's pregnant, scared, living in a specialized group home because regular foster families couldn't handle her situation. She's got zero family support, no permanent address to run to, and a 36-year-old predator who's made it clear what happens if she doesn't obey. Davis didn't need chains or locked doors. Fear was his weapon of choice, and it worked perfectly. Zariah was trapped in plain sight while everyone around her failed to understand just how desperate her situation had become. This girl wanted the same thing every kid wants: safety and a place to belong. Instead, she got a nightmare that was about to cost her everything. Davis had this whole thing figured out. He wasn't just randomly picking teenagers, he was hunting. His target: girls in foster care who were starving for attention and had nobody watching their backs. Girls like 17-year-old Anya Morris, who he'd already gotten in trouble for messing with. The courts told him to stay away from minors completely. But here's the thing about predators: they don't really care about court orders. While he was supposed to be on probation and avoiding kids altogether, Davis was busy grooming Zariah, the system that was meant to monitor him. Basically, asleep at the wheel. This guy had been collecting victims for years, and everyone just kept letting it happen. April 2025. Zariah arrives at Sunshine Residential, pregnant and terrified. But here's what made her different from a lot of victims. She wasn't staying quiet. This girl was practically broadcasting her fear to anyone with ears. Her first stop: the Department of Child Safety caseworker. Zariah laid it all out. Davis was the father, she was scared of him, and oh yeah, he had a gun. Not just any threat either. She told them straight up, if I don't have sex with him, he'll use that handgun on me. Picture a trained professional hearing this from a pregnant 16-year-old. Your brain should immediately go to emergency mode, right? Well, the caseworker did report it to police. Problem is, nobody seems to know which police department actually got the message. Phoenix Police. We can't confirm we received that report. Surprise Police. Same story. Somewhere in the bureaucratic maze, Zariah's life or death warning just disappeared. But Zariah didn't give up. She kept telling everyone, roommates, staff members, basically anyone who'd listen. The Department of Child Safety knew a 36-year-old had gotten a 15-year-old pregnant. They knew about the gun threats. They knew she was living in terror. Their response? Schedule a forensic interview. When? July 8th, 2025. Let that sink in. 3 months. For 3 entire months, Zariah woke up every day knowing Davis could kill her, while the system took its sweet time scheduling a meeting. This forensic interview was supposed to be Davis's downfall. Zariah was ready to spill everything, all the abuse, all the threats, all the evidence needed to lock him up for good. She just had to survive until July 8th. She didn't make it. July 5th, 3 days before her scheduled testimony, Zariah was found shot in the head. Davis knew that interview was coming. He knew Zariah was about to destroy him in court, so he made sure she'd never get the chance to speak. Meanwhile, Davis was supposed to be monitored because of his probation. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near minors, but nobody was actually watching. He was free to terrorize Zariah, free to plan her murder, free to do whatever he wanted. And what about Sunshine Residential? How does a 16-year-old in your care end up pregnant by a 36-year-old predator? Why could she just walk out alone at night? Where were the basic safety protocols that might have kept her alive? Zariah's story wasn't some rare tragedy. This kind of system failure happens more often than anyone wants to admit. Here's something that'll make your blood boil. Zariah wasn't alone. She was one of 3 kids under Arizona's Department of Child Safety who got murdered in 2025. 3 children. Same system, same failures, same deadly results. July 4th evening, while everyone else was getting ready for fireworks, Zariah was planning what would become her final trip. She told the group home staff she wanted to visit a friend that night. Her caseworker shot that down immediately, but offered a compromise. You can go for a walk. A walk with the man who'd been threatening to kill her for months. But here's the thing about being controlled by a predator. When Davis called, Zariah felt like she had zero options. That's psychological warfare 101. The victim believes they're choosing, but they're really just following the only script they think will keep them alive a little longer. Before stepping out that door, Zariah grabbed her phone and sent 2 messages that would later haunt investigators. First text to her roommate, "We are literally driving in circles." Second text, even more chilling, "Afraid." 2 words that said absolutely everything. This wasn't some dramatic teenage moment. This was a girl who knew she was walking toward her own death, but felt powerless to stop it. Picture this. You're 16, pregnant, sitting in a car with a man who's twice your age and has threatened to shoot you. You know something terrible is about to happen, so you text your roommate hoping maybe someone will come looking for you. Zariah walked out of Sunshine Residential around 8 p.m. on July 4th. The staff watched her leave, knowing about Davis, knowing about the gun threats, knowing she was terrified, and they just let her go. But here's where it gets even more infuriating. They didn't report her missing until after midnight on July 5th. Think about that timeline. A pregnant teenager receiving death threats disappears, and they wait over 4 hours to call police. 4 hours. In those 4 hours, while the group home staff was probably hoping she'd just come back on her own, Zariah was being murdered. Why the delay? Maybe they thought she was just another runaway. Maybe they didn't want to deal with the paperwork. Maybe they genuinely didn't understand how much danger she was in. Whatever their reasoning, it cost Zariah her life. This wasn't some random teen who snuck out to party. This was a girl who'd been screaming for help for months, who'd told everyone about the gun threats, who'd begged people to protect her. She should have had eyes on her 24/7, not permission to take evening strolls with her would-be killer. Saturday morning, July 5th, Marrow View Park near 59th Avenue and Thomas Road. Someone's taking their usual morning walk when they stumble across something that'll give them nightmares for life. A young woman's body, clearly pregnant, with a fatal gunshot wound to the head. Phoenix PD swooped in fast, cordoning off the area and starting their evidence collection. But here's the first problem. No ID on the victim. This girl was a complete mystery to them, just another Jane Doe in the system. What made this scene even more devastating? They weren't looking at one murder, they were looking at 2. The gunshot that killed this teenager also killed her unborn daughter. Double homicide with a single bullet. While detectives were processing the crime scene, panic was setting in back at Sunshine Residential. Zariah had been gone all night, and the staff were finally starting to realize this wasn't just another runaway situation. The cops had a body. The group home had a missing girl, but nobody had put 2 and 2 together yet. Phoenix investigators knew they were dealing with someone's daughter, someone's unborn grandchild, but they needed science to tell them exactly whose. Dental records became their best friend, unique as fingerprints and way more reliable than trying to identify a gunshot victim any other way. July 10th, 5 agonizing days after finding the body, the dental records came back with the confirmation everyone was dreading. The pregnant teenager found in Marrow View Park was 16-year-old Zariah Dodd, the same girl who'd been begging for protection for months. The same girl who'd texted afraid on her final night. The same girl whose forensic interview was scheduled for 3 days after her murder. News of Zariah's death hit like a freight train. Richland Fox, one of Zariah's former caregivers, didn't mince words when talking to reporters. Her quote summed up everyone's rage perfectly. "It's sick that you will take another child's life because you don't want the truth to come out." Detectives weren't looking at some random park shooting. This was targeted, calculated, and personal. Someone knew Zariah was pregnant. Someone knew about her upcoming testimony. Someone knew exactly how much danger she posed to them if she lived long enough to talk. The investigation was officially underway, but honestly, the cops already had a pretty good idea where to start looking. For nearly a month, Phoenix detectives were grinding non-stop. This wasn't some random park shooting they were dealing with. This was an execution. Someone had specifically targeted a pregnant 16-year-old just days before she was supposed to destroy them in court. The investigation was like following breadcrumbs. Who wanted Zariah dead? Who knew about that July 8th forensic interview? Who had threatened her before? Every single lead pointed straight back to Gerald Davis. Davis had everything to lose if Zariah talked. He was looking at decades behind bars for getting a 15-year-old pregnant and threatening her with a gun. But when detectives started piecing together that final night, they realized something huge. Davis didn't pull this off solo. August 1st, 2025, Phoenix PD made 2 arrests that blew the case wide open. Gerald Davis, 36, and Jeffrey James Gillett, 18. Both charged with double murder, 1 count for Zariah, another for her unborn daughter. Davis got the bonus charge of sexual conduct with a minor. But wait, who the hell was Jeffrey James Gillett? Here's where this story gets really twisted. Gillett wasn't just some random accomplice. According to prosecutors, this 18-year-old was supposedly dating Zariah. So we've got Davis, the baby daddy who'd been terrorizing her, and Gillett, the new boyfriend, both of them working together to kill her. But here's the kicker. Court documents revealed that Gillett was the one who picked up Zariah that final night. He drove her straight to Davis. This kid essentially delivered his own girlfriend to her execution. The prosecutor laid out the timeline in court, and it was chilling. This wasn't some heat-of-the-moment crime. This was a calculated conspiracy between 2 men to silence Zariah before she could testify. Think about the planning involved here. 2 people had to agree that a pregnant teenager needed to die. 2 people had to coordinate her pickup and murder. 2 people had to execute their plan 3 days before she was scheduled to speak. The charges reflected the severity: first-degree murder, meaning premeditated. The prosecutors weren't claiming this was an accident or a fight gone wrong. They were saying these men sat down, planned Zariah's death, and carried it out. So why would Gillett help kill someone he was supposedly dating? Here's where Davis's pattern of controlling young people becomes crucial. This guy was a master manipulator who knew how to exploit vulnerable kids. Gillett was only 18, barely legal himself. Davis had years of experience manipulating teenagers in foster care. It's entirely possible he played Gillett like a fiddle, convincing him that Zariah was the problem, not Davis. The case against both men was rock solid. Police had witness statements about Zariah's fears. They had documentation of Davis's threats. They had proof that Gillett picked her up that night. Most damning of all, they had the motive and timing. Davis was staring down serious prison time if Zariah testified on July 8th. She was murdered July 5th. The math wasn't complicated. When the arrests hit the news, Zariah's former caregiver, Richland Fox, felt that justice was finally coming. But this was just the beginning of a legal battle that would force everyone to relive the horror of Zariah's final hours. Both Davis and Gillett were about to fight these charges, and the state was ready to reveal exactly what happened during Zariah's last night alive. In court, they were receipts, and these receipts were about to destroy both Davis and Gillett. First bombshell, DNA testing on Zariah's unborn daughter, came back with crystal clear results. Gerald Davis was definitely the father. But here's what made this evidence so damning. Based on the baby's development, conception happened when Zariah was only 15 years old. The prosecutor looked straight at the judge and laid it out. The suspect is 36 or 37 years old, Your Honor. That is absolutely concerning. Translation: This wasn't some gray area relationship. This was a grown man preying on a child. The prosecutor walked the court through Zariah's final days like she was narrating a horror movie. July 4th, Zariah tells witnesses she's meeting her baby's father. Everyone knew she meant Davis. That was the last time anyone saw her breathing. July 5th, her body turns up in Marrowview Park with a bullet in her head. July 10th, dental records confirm everyone's worst fears. The pregnant teenager was indeed Zariah Dodd, but he saved the most explosive detail for last. Jeffrey James Gillett wasn't just some random accomplice. He was supposedly dating Zariah while also helping Davis murder her. Even worse, evidence showed Gillett was the one who picked up Zariah before she was killed. Think about that for a second. This 18-year-old drove his own girlfriend to her execution. Either he was completely manipulated by Davis, or he's way more cold-blooded than anyone imagined. The judge wasn't playing games. Both Davis and Gillett got slapped with $1 million bonds. Not the usual pay 10% and walk free deal. This was cash only. They'd need to cough up the full $1 million up front, which basically guaranteed they'd be sitting in Maricopa County Jail for the foreseeable future. The judge also threw in some extra conditions. If either man somehow posted bond, they couldn't contact witnesses, victims, complainants, or each other. Basically, they were isolated until trial. Here's where this story gets really infuriating. Davis wasn't some unknown predator flying under the radar. He was supposed to be on probation for messing with 17-year-old Anya Morris. The courts had already told him to stay away from minors. But here's the catch. His probation was unsupervised. Nobody was checking on him. Nobody was making sure he followed the rules. He was free to terrorize Zariah, free to plan her murder, free to do whatever he wanted. Unsupervised probation for a repeat child predator. That's like giving a pyromaniac unsupervised access to matches and then acting surprised when buildings start burning down. The prosecutor made it crystal clear why Zariah had to die. She was scheduled for that forensic interview on July 8th, the interview that would have exposed everything Davis had done to her. Given her age when the abuse started, he was looking at serious prison time. 3 days before she could testify, Zariah was dead. That timing wasn't cosmic coincidence. That was calculated murder. The courtroom revelations painted a picture of two men who sat down, planned the death of a pregnant teenager, and executed their plan with military precision. The evidence was piling up, and both Davis and Gillett were about to find out that silencing Zariah hadn't silenced the truth. Legal experts weren't mincing words when they looked at what happened to Zariah. Criminal defense attorney Benjamin Taylor put it bluntly, "The group home here, if they are found negligent, they can be found negligent for child abuse charges." Think about it. How does a pregnant 16-year-old who's been receiving death threats just walk out alone at night? Where were the basic safety protocols? Why wasn't someone watching her every move? Remember that April report about Davis's gun threats? The one that vanished into thin air? That communication breakdown literally cost Zariah her life. Her caseworker did the right thing and reported it, but then it just disappeared. Phoenix PD couldn't confirm they got it. Surprise PD said the same thing. Somewhere in the bureaucratic maze, a teenage girl's desperate plea for help became just another lost file. Here's the part that should keep everyone awake at night. Zariah wasn't alone. She was one of 3 children under Arizona's Department of Child Safety who were murdered in 2025. 3 kids, same system, same deadly failures. Foster care advocate Annika Robinson asked the question everyone was thinking: why does this need to keep occurring? Death after death after death. Benjamin Taylor delivered the harsh truth. The system is broken here. A lot of times it is overwhelmed with minors, A lot of times there's not enough resources out there, and sometimes minors unfortunately die in the hands of the group homes. Zariah's death wasn't some unavoidable tragedy. It was a series of preventable failures. Here's what should have happened differently. Zariah told her caseworker Davis had a gun and threatened to use it. That should have triggered emergency protection protocols, not a 3-month wait for an interview. When someone says they're being threatened with a weapon, you don't schedule a meeting, you act. Davis was on probation for targeting another minor, but nobody was watching him. Unsupervised probation for a repeat child predator? That's like leaving a fox to guard the henhouse and acting shocked when chickens go missing. Zariah kept saying she was afraid. She begged people to protect her. Too many adults wrote off her fears as typical teenage drama instead of recognizing genuine terror. When a kid in foster care says they're scared, that's not the time to dismiss them. A pregnant teenager receiving death threats should never be allowed to leave alone at night. Period. The fact that Sunshine Residential let this happen shows they fundamentally didn't understand the danger Zariah was in. When one agency reports a threat, every relevant department should know about it immediately. The information shouldn't get lost in some bureaucratic black hole while kids die waiting for help. The most important takeaway from Zariah's story isn't complicated. When children say they're in danger, we must listen and act fast. Not next week, not next month, not after we schedule the right meeting. Immediately. Zariah Dodd should be alive today. She should be raising her daughter, building a future, maybe even advocating for other kids in foster care. Instead, she became another statistic, another failure of a system that was supposed to protect her. But her story doesn't end with her death. Every person who learns about what happened to Zariah, every policy change that comes from her case, every future victim who gets help because people remember her name, that's her legacy. The fight for justice continues, and the push for real change in Arizona's child protection system carries Zariah's memory forward. Because no other 16-year-old should have to text "afraid" as their final message to the world. Right now, Davis and Gillett are sitting in Maricopa County Jail with those million-dollar price tags hanging over their heads. Both facing double murder charges, one for Zariah, one for her unborn daughter. That cash-only bond means they're not going anywhere anytime soon. The legal machinery is grinding forward, and hopefully, justice will finally catch up to the men who silenced a pregnant teenager to protect their own secrets. Richland Fox, one of Zariah's former caregivers, cut straight to the heart of it. It's sick that you will take another child's life because you don't want the truth to come out. But here's the thing. The truth is coming out now, and people are pissed. The Department of Child Safety is scrambling to review whether Sunshine Residential actually followed their licensing requirements. Spoiler alert, letting a pregnant teen with death threats walk out alone at night probably wasn't in their safety manual. Advocates are finally pushing for real changes to protect vulnerable kids. Zariah's story has become a rallying cry, forcing uncomfortable conversations about how we treat our most defenseless young people. Zariah deserved so much better than the life she got. Every kid trapped in this broken system deserves better. Her death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a failure of every adult who was supposed to protect her. But if her story prevents even one other child from texting "afraid" as their final message, if it forces real reform in how we protect kids in care, if it makes one caseworker take gun threats seriously instead of scheduling meetings, then maybe Zariah's voice will finally be heard. The legal process will play out in courtrooms and probably drag on for months. But the real justice for Zariah happens when we refuse to let another vulnerable kid fall through the same deadly cracks that killed her. Because silence is what allowed Davis to hunt teenagers for years. Silence is what let the system fail Zariah over and over. And silence is what kills kids who are crying out for help. Zariah's story is out now. The truth is coming out. And that's exactly what Davis was trying to prevent when he put a bullet in her head. Look, I get it. Hearing about cases like Zariah's is heartbreaking and infuriating. You want to do something, anything, to make sure this never happens again. Here's what you can do right now. Hit that like button and share this story. I know it sounds simple, but every share puts Zariah's name in front of someone new. Every like tells the algorithm that these stories matter. Every view forces people to confront the reality of what's happening to kids in our system. Because here's the truth. The Department of Child Safety, the group homes, the probation officers, they're all watching these numbers. They see when stories like Zariah's blow up. They feel the pressure when people refuse to stay quiet. Davis and his accomplice thought they could murder a pregnant teenager and everyone would just move on. They counted on silence. They counted on people forgetting. Don't let them be right. Share Zariah's story. Make her name trend. Force people to ask the hard questions about why a 16-year-old had to text afraid before being executed. Your clicks, your shares, your comments, that's how we turn tragedy into change. That's how we make sure Zariah's voice finally gets heard. So what are you waiting for? Hit that button. Share this story. Because the only thing worse than Zariah's death would be letting everyone forget her name.